So run me back to your early days. Tell me about your upbringing, your surroundings. How'd you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so going all the way back, so originally from Canada, that's where I was born and raised, and grew up being super active. So sports were a huge part of my upbringing. Had an older brother too that played sports, so definitely that kind of always drew me to it. And the sports growing up, obviously hockey was huge, so I loved hockey as a kid. Really got into baseball. Those were kind of the two main sports, but I did a little bit of everything. I played some golf. Volleyball was really big where I was at in Canada, so I even played that all the way through high school. Played golf, loved to alpine ski, really anything, especially in younger ages, like playing every sport. You play soccer, play basketball, but baseball and hockey were always kind of the two big ones for me. So part of that was, growing up as a Canadian kid. One thing when you look ahead to going to college, if you want to play sports, everyone, as they say in Canada, they want to go to the States to play. So I was one of those kids, and that's kind of just in my head. I just assumed, I'm just gonna go to college in the U.S. because I'm gonna, play baseball or hockey or something, and that's kind of the path that set me to come over to the U.S. So eventually came over, and that's kind of what led me, and obviously I haven't left since then. But if you're serious about sports, you would want to go to an American college. That was kind of just the stereotype in Canada, and like I said, I fell in that. So I went to a school in upstate New York called St. Lawrence University, and it was there that I would say really started to diverge in terms of what I was going to do. Definitely after sports, the level I was at, I knew that college would kind of be the top for me. I certainly was very serious about it, but I was always someone who was kind of curious about everything, and tried to be well rounded and involved on campus, and especially going to a smaller school. There were things that kind of I got exposed to, and different people and students and professors that were interesting. And so I had originally went in thinking I was going to do sciences. My older brother's a doctor. He was kind of the one who always paved the way for me. And I just thought, I'm going to follow and keep in those footsteps. And I took all my pre-meds and sciences and neuroscience. And then I realized, hey, like I really didn't think I wanted to be a doctor. And I'd still done economics because I had a really good professor freshman
Mhm.
year that I never really knew much about econ. And that kind of got me interested in it. So I did that as well. So, and then probably by like my junior year of college, I had a friend who was talking to me about like startups and companies and being your own boss and how you can create something. And I had never really thought about that. And it was just like, oh, this is really interesting. This is different. I've never really thought about that. I always just
So
thought about
you
like
you
medicine and
never
being a
really
doctor.
you never really dived down like the business route in terms of like
Un-
entrepreneurial aspects.
until that time, as a kid, we would do things like, hey, write little, businesses for, you do a lemonade stand, doing yard work, landscaping, we had that, but I never really thought about it as a way of like, hey, like this is what I'm going to do. I always thought there's going to be some, position where I'll be where, I definitely wanted to lead and move things forward. And in college,
A
I was a
traditional job.
team captain where I could definitely always saw myself, I really wanted to strive for a leadership type role, but never set of like business until that kind of turned the page. And I realized just how much like wow, like my personality and what I'm into is way more aligned with starting a company than probably being a physician and doctor. So that kind of sparked it. And then what really kind of changed things for me was I had a really bad injury my junior year as well. And I think that's where it changed a lot of my thinking. And so I dove for a ball in the outfield, dislocated my shoulder, needed a labrum repair, reconstructive surgery. So for me, trying to make a comeback for senior year, I worked with the athletic trainer a ton post op, and we used cables a lot.
Hmm.
I always used cables, but never really that much. It was never even such a core of what I was doing to build back strength. And the reason was is cables are super easy on your joints. They're safe. You can change the resistance very easily, and you can work in so many different planes. So it's like, wow, these are really great for the condition I'm in right now and trying to get back. And then the observation came, well, if they're so great, why is there only like one or two in like every gym? Or we only had like one good one in the varsity room, weight room at the time. And it's like, well, it's probably because they're like really big. They take up space, they're heavy, and they're also really expensive commercial pieces. And that was kind of the idea. And I remember sitting with one of my friends, and we would start at that point. We were writing like, oh, ideas for businesses, and he was kind of the one who really got me in that path of thinking. And that was one of the ideas I had, was like, hey, and he kind of helped me out with that, of like, hey, it'd be really great to have some type of portable, accessible cable machine where it still has good feeling resistance.
And this was on
Um,
your own or in a class?
so this was just on our own. Like, this was
Okay.
like, we
You were
just
just
like
whipping up.
in college, and it was like a Friday, Saturday night. Instead of going out, we were like sitting in a room, like writing down ideas and
Yeah, that's
business
awesome.
things. And we had no idea what we were doing. But, at the time, when I look back now, I'm like, wow, I'm glad I did that, because it kind of changed just my mindset toward
Hmm.
things. And then I sat on that idea for a bit of time, because right after undergrad, I went and I briefly played baseball over in Europe for a season, and then came back. Went to a grad program at Babson College, which is what brought me to Boston. And I was prepared to play baseball there, because I still had 1 year of eligibility because of my shoulder
Yep.
injury. I had a medical red shirt, and so I was going to play. And then it kind of came down to seeing the class schedule and seeing the practice schedule and meeting with the coach and our program director. And I was going to miss so much class of that
Yeah,
program. And
it's
it was a
tough.
master's of science in entrepreneurship. And obviously that's what drew me to Babson, was like, oh, I started to think about startups, and like, that was really cool. And so Babson is the epitome. Like, their whole thing is like, we are good at one thing, and that's entrepreneurship. And so I was like, oh, this could be neat. And it's a program that like no one else has, like a master of science in entrepreneurship. It's such like what do you compare that to? It's not an MBA. And I kind of liked the aspect of doing something different. So I was like,
Hmm.
what, I'll do this. It's a small school too. I kind of like the small school environment. I felt it was good for the way that I fit in. And that was the program that, we all had to pitch a business idea. And obviously I went back to that
Shark
idea
Tank.
that, there you go. That was the style of it. And it was like, I think there was like 65 of us in the master's program, and everyone had to pitch an idea. And then they voted
Right.
on like, which one would you invest in, or which one would you want to work for? And then they got whittled down to like 12. And then those are the ones you go work on for the rest of the school year in that
Hmm.
program. So obviously the one idea I had, I was like, well, this is the only good idea I have. I was like, I'd want this product. And I think that, knowing, just from athletics, that I think there'd be a lot of people who would want it. So that kind of obviously really gets into where like the Anchor story itself starts in the Babson days.
Did you ever did you have support when you were trying to switch destinations in your career path? You said you want to be a doctor. Was that a specific reason? And when you said maybe you want to be an entrepreneur, or maybe you said maybe I just want to be a finance guy, whatever it is.
Yeah, there were moments where, when I first got introduced in college to like economics, I was like, oh, I saw the other students, you see what other people do, and you realize, oh, like you can easily like, oh, go the Wall Street path. And then I was like realizing, oh yeah, that'd be cool, right? Because you work for a, big company and brand, and everyone recognizes it. And then, I think my thinking evolved to the point of like, do I actually want this, or is this just what, seems appealing based on everyone else here? And, it's a acceptable and respectable path. And, it's great. People do very well in those areas, but I just realized, hey, that's not actually what I want. And that's, not for me. And the same kind of happened with medicine, realizing like, oh, it's a very respectable job. And like I said, my whole family, it's all medicine. Everyone in my family is in the medical field, brother, sister, parent, except me. So it was very much like, I just kind of assumed, oh, just, that's what you do.
Showing
Everyone's
it.
in the family doing that. And obviously my parents were supportive. Like, they weren't never like, oh, we're mad you're not going to be a doctor. I think they realized that I wasn't going to choose that path, and because I really wanted to do something else. And starting a business was definitely something that I became kind of, once I flipped that switch, probably junior year of college, it became like the primary thing on my mind that I just really wanted to explore and do. And at that time, having no real business background, had some internships, worked some other companies, which, taught me a lot about, oh, how a business runs. And these are all the different
Hmm.
departments and things you think about. So it really just kind of set off that intellectual curiosity of like completely kind of gripping me that, okay, I really want to start a business. And that kind of flowed into that decision to go to Babson.
How much does school? How much is it implemented in creating a business itself? The
You
educational
know,
part.
Yeah, it's I know it's a good note there, the educational part, because I think about, the classmates and the certain people I meet from like network or relationship or friend status, and how those, are the ones that I think back on of the importance. But when I think of like, if you're talking about curriculum and schoolwork,
Yeah.
I think for me, it was good that it introduced me to certain like terms and lingos and things that
Mhm.
exist and, conventions. Okay, accounting, this is, the general principles, or to become familiar with things, because I didn't really have that business background. But when I think about, the actual coursework, right, it's so much more about like communication skills. Like it was like, okay, I wish I sharpened my ability to articulate points clearly and speak to people in very clear and concise, and um, ways that people respond well and will understand me, and also write very clearly and write an email that's clear and
Did
concise, like
did
all these
those
things. And
did those
I think
business
critically too.
classes ever teach you about that, or touch upon that?
In the business ones, no, it was a lot of like, even in undergrad, I guess, I went to a liberal arts school, so I got exposed to like things like, philosophy and some writing courses, which when I look back, like some of those were actually good. Of like, okay, I need
Yep.
to like write clearly and articulate my point. And I realized that those instances and be able to speak in front of people, and I'm touching on all things like almost outside of what you think of the direct education, because I learned how to do really well in school. When I look back, like I learned how the systems and how people test, and you're incentivized to get a grade, right? Not to necessarily learn the concepts. And I think that is something that frustrated me, but also I fell in that trap in terms of the incentive, because it's like, well, I'm rewarded for a grade perspective to learn certain things for a test or for an assignment. Like I could figure out just through like, the communication skills that I had of like, okay, what a professor wants, this is what they're going to look for. And I navigated myself really well, which when I look back on, do I wish maybe I spent some more time? You know what? I would really just love to learn this concept and like dive deep
Mhm.
and just read about it. Right. Like sometimes I'm like, why don't like that? Just let us do that. I would love to do that. But it paid off because I did well in school, and it gave me a fellowship to go to Babson because of the grades. So when I look back at it, it's kind of like, well, it did help me. It got me that fellowship scholarship, and gave me the financial means to have my education in grad
Paved
school
the
paid for.
path.
So exactly. So at the same time, was it worked out for me? But when I look back, it's like, I probably could have got more out of it, but at least it was a means to an end, for me to get to that kind of next point, and really a stepping stone. But yeah, I don't think it's end all be all, because like I said, what I mean, even for Anchor, right? Like if you have a degree or not, that's not what I'm concerned about and looking for. It's, your work ethic, your communication skills, the way you're working with others. There's so many other attributes that you can prove out, rather than, I don't think that school is, a straight predictor of how well you're going to do in your career whatsoever. It's more about just like learning and developing your skill set and work ethic and communication skills. Like those are the things that I think are important as takeaways from school.
I mean, I agree with that, but I'm biased.
I was the opposite, right? Like I was the opposite in school, and I still agree with you, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like I did the whole other thing, you could say, and I completely agree. And I think we're on the same page with that, which I think, is maybe we're getting at something.
Yeah. I wanted to circle back to right after you finished the Shark Tank in that class, and you had the idea. What was the next step, and what were you thinking, envisioning? Maybe career path, or maybe you were like, "Let's do this right now."
Yeah. So first off, it was like I was set. Like I really wanted to start a business out of Babson. Like that was one of the things. I knew that was a project and a big component of that course. So that was like something I had written on the wall. It was like, I want to be in progress with starting a business, when I come out of Babson. And so after pitching the idea, I met Nathaniel, my co-founder and, classmate and friend. And so he resonated with the idea because he had the same shoulder injury from like a more extreme sport. Like he was a mountain biker, outdoors guy. And so he also had the mechanical engineering background where he's like, hey, I think I have a design idea to make, your idea work. And so that kind of brought us together. And he also was someone who was like, I really want to start a business too. So there was like this kind of level of alignment we had, but also it came down to skill set too. Like to this day, he runs the back end. He's the head engineer, and I run the front end of the business, out with customers. So it was really good because our skill sets were very, very different, which is, was the best thing for us. But yet our alignment in terms of direction and what we wanted and vision, we shared. So it turned out to really, be a good partnership, obviously to this day. so finding him was incredible. Like that was, what made Anchor happen, because he came up with design. And then from there, it was like, okay, we got to try to build it. Like, is it possible? And
Hmm.
so we borrowed one of his buddies in Waltham at the time, had an auto shop and a 3D printer. And so we used his 3D printer, he let us use it, and we made the first model, built it, and like we were ecstatic. We thought it was unreal. And like you could get like 2 feet of cable out of it and you couldn't adjust the resistance, and had that suction cup mount. It was like, looking back at it, I mean, you can sell that at all, but we were excited enough to be like, okay, like this is proving the concept. I remember like presenting it in class, because when we started the project, we had very like bad reception from the professors initially about like our idea and our progress and kind of
Well,
the
that's how it
process
always
we went
goes, right?
along.
It's always a
Yeah,
bad
so
idea until it works.
yeah, because our first presentation about it, in terms of going down that path, we always would joke about, because it was a pass fail assignment, but we didn't get a pass or fail. They gave us a low pass because I think, we weren't failable, but they just didn't want to give us a full pass, and they just made up another category. So that was kind of something that gave us a little chip, of course, that, okay, we want to make this happen. So for us to come back with this prototype was really cool, of like, hey, look, we actually built something real. And then it was kind of the next step of like, okay, well, this is clearly a start, but like, what else do we need? And it was kind of like, okay, people need adjustable resistance. So how do we come up with that? So Nate came up with that plate system. Hey, here's how we can incrementally add it. And then how are people going to mount it? Well, okay, the suction cup, that doesn't work. How else are we going to do it? Are they going to strap it around something? They're going to put it on the wall? It's like, hey, can we make the mounts interchangeable? Let's do a modular system. And that's really how things started to evolve in terms of, okay, what do we build next? And out of the program, Nate and I were like, hey, we really want to start this. Like, we showed some people the 3D prints, and we look back at like the progress we had made. Like, we thought it was probably even more than it really was at the time. So you could, when I look back, it's like more of our ambitious
Hmm.
gut feeling that, hey, this could work, people want it. That's probably what drove it as much as anything. Because when I look back at how much evidence we had to be like, oh, we can create a profitable growing business out of this, it was probably pretty limited. I mean, it really was just like, hey, our sights were set on, hey, we could make this thing a lot better, and I think people would buy it
It
because
sounds
I would
like
use it.
it sounds like you had little to no doubt that it would work.
Which is kind of weird. As part of it's to say is like, were we being young and naive? Probably, but were we also having like some really passion about it, and a space that I really cared about and I loved? And we had Nate's engineering mind too, where two guys right out of school, and we decided, hey, let's start it, and we set up Nathaniel's dad's garage in there, which obviously, you'll be tying in soon enough to this story, but we okay, we can do it. We got no overhead in the garage. We'll be able to start building them, and Nate knows all the CAD work, and then we both chipped in some money to buy a 3D printer, and like, okay, two guys in the garage can start building prototypes and samples of this, and that's all it took. So thanks to all those things and having the 3D print technology, like we were able to build usable models of these
Hmm.
next generations and get them out to different strength coaches in the area, physical therapists, people who are really into fitness, and get some feedback and see where it was going. And the overall reception was pretty positive, so we were thrilled with that. And it was like, okay, let's keep going. So it was kind of like, inch by inch, okay, can we get a little further along day by day? And
Now, were
that
you
was
experimenting throughout the process? Because you this was your first startup company, first business. So how are you
for
going
sure.
through this process, and how are you being guided, or is it just
Yeah, a lot of
trial
it
and
was
error?
you're trying to learn on it, and it's like you get a taste of everything when you try to start a business, because it's like at day one, it's the legal stuff, right? Like, how do you form the company? Like, what do we have to do? Oh, the things online. Do we need a lawyer to start the entity? Do we fill out? There's websites online that'll do it for you. Navigating that, and then also we're creating technology, and technology comes with intellectual property, which is important to as a business. And so, okay, if we're going to have a patent, then how do we go get a patent? And okay, we need a patent lawyer, and how do we find one of those, and how much should that cost, and where are we going to get the money to pay for that? These are all things early on where it's like, well, how much should I expect to pay for that? Like, we just didn't know. And that's why things at the beginning, it's slower. Like, we would
Hmm.
deliberate over like spending $100, and then we look at where we're now, like that's like not even a question in terms of the size of orders of parts and things that we have to place now. The way I kind of look at it, when I kind of reflect back is that, the problems, as we started to get a little traction and you start to get success, it's not that the problems go away or they become smaller because you're getting success and things are changing for the good. The problems actually only get bigger. They continue to get bigger and bigger. But at the same time, if you're actually progressing and learning and developing, your propensity to deal with those problems also grows. And you grow it, if you can grow it just ahead of the size of the growing problems, then
Yep.
you're able to stay on top of things.
Catch
And,
up.
when you're doing a startup, like that's kind of the phenomenon when I look back, that like that's what was going on. It wasn't that the problems were going away as we got bigger; they were just getting bigger. But now you become more confident in your decisions. You become quicker to be able to assess, okay, is this a good or bad decision? Where should I go to advice? Who should I go to? Who might know more about this? Things like that. Because that's what we did early on. Like, okay, who started a company that we know? Okay,
So
what did you
that's all
guys do for
relationships
lawyer?
and networks that you're reaching out
Exactly.
to.
So it was friends, people from Babson, obviously, Bruce Nathaniel sat, he's still to this day, a super helpful advisor of, hey, do you have anyone that, that, we can connect to that has done this before? And I think the patent lawyer we still use to this day was a connection from my uncle had once done a patent, thing with her. And so, she's still, 4+ years later, probably four, yeah, at least she's still doing all of our, IP work. And so some of those connections really, come back and live on to this day. And some of them you kind of zigzag around and to try to triangulate, okay, is this the right path? And certain things you have to decide faster than others. But we certainly, with some of those things, like now it's like, oh, you need to go start some from scratch. You probably, I look back, I'm probably able to make all those decisions way faster. And part of it was just, we had to learn and we had to experience those things and some of the mistakes we made. If we didn't experience those, we wouldn't have the learning that we do and the knowledge now, to obviously not make those when the stakes are higher.
Yeah, you gotta fail to learn. You gotta fall over the rock and fall forward, then you get up.
Yeah, exactly. Because and especially in the early days too, like when in that stage, like most people, you tell someone about what you're doing, they're like, oh, that's cute, or oh, like nice, right? Like what I mean. They say that, and at the same time, you're like in your head, it's gonna work, but what I mean. Hey, you don't have to show it yet, so what I mean. Part of it is, yeah, you really, for me, I was just so dedicated to like, hey, I really think we're on to something here, and obviously, when people look at us now, and it's not ever like a, hey, the attitude is not, I told you so. It's that no, like what I mean. I just you believe in yourself, and yeah, I want to make it happen. And I want to be able to say, hey, like we've made an impact in the industry. We made an impact to growing our team and creating jobs and, a work environment that people enjoy every day. Like those are the things that, what I mean, I start to shift to rather than it's like you're proving, to necessarily prove other people wrong. It's like, no, like, let's create something good for a lot of people. So that's where, you kind of, the mindset I think has changed over time. And certainly myself, I've definitely learned a lot and matured, over the last 4 or 5 years doing this.
When did the ball really start rolling? When did you start gaining traction? Was it in the beginning, or
Yeah.
did it take a while?
So I would say, we started to, pick up because I realized, and, it's my job to try to, get the product out there. And how do I do that? I've never launched a product before, but one thing that I was always very focused on, and I just knew, okay, relationships are important and taking care of people and trying to build trust. So when we got the product out to different people, it was, one, very early days getting feedback, but then two, when people liked it, it's like, hey, okay, is someone willing to pay? And okay, we had someone willing to pay one. And then, okay, that person, can I make sure that they're having a good experience? Because other people, they're going to use the product with them. I want to make sure, hey, is there going to be an issue with the product? And we learned very quickly, like, if we just take care of people, even if there was an issue, but we do it quick and efficient and convenient for those people, that actually builds trust. It's not that they'll, abandon you. And I think because we didn't abandon them, that was really important. And we've tried to continue that to this day that, hey, we're not going to try to sell you on the fact that, hey, we're selling a perfect product. We're going to tell you, hey, it's a really, really good product. But if you have an issue, just let us know and we'll take care of it. Because if you're not having a good experience, it's not good for you, but it's not good for us either. And I think that kind of concept early on really helps. So then when we had, one trainer who had it and then they showed another trainer and it started to just pick up like that. And
Domino
when you get a
effect.
couple of those, it's that exactly that snowball and network effect. But it was like trying to do that boots on the ground work to make sure that, hey, those people are having a good experience and taken care of. And then, um, And then, all of a sudden you get other people reaching out about the product we realized, oh, like more reputable trainers. And we had one that had found out about it from one of our early customers, who was with the New Jersey Devils. And that was the first team. They reached out and they saw it and they wanted it. And then once they got it, a bunch of players wanted it for their home gyms. And then once they had it, the New York Rangers wanted to look at it and they got it, and the Penguins got it, and then the Coyotes got it.
So
And
was that
then
a
it
pivotal
just
moment
snowballed.
when
For
when the
sure, it was
NHL started
incredible
getting in it?
that, yeah, early on, that, hey, the top of a professional sport in the entire world is reaching out to us for the product. It was most like astonishing and, humbling thing at the time. It was like, wow, like they're reaching out to a couple guys in a garage for a product that they're going to use with the top hockey players in the entire world. And it was like, okay, like I think we're onto something here. So we really, you know, really molded our brand around high performance athletes. And then, hockey coaches, they know the baseball coaches and the basketball. And so they all, at the highest level, they all are seeing like, oh, what products are you using? And that's what really picked up steam to the point where, we were looking for help in the garage to build the products, and we couldn't obviously keep up with it. And so, you had a taste of that when we were still in the garage of what it was like trying to sell products. And it was wild to think that some of these teams,
I was there
had
for the
no
early
idea.
days.
Nick's got direct experience. So, you
Yeah.
saw like we were
Well,
just piecing these together, learning
yeah.
along the way.
Actually,
And
I want you to explain what the Ancore is.
Anchor is a compact portable version of a cable machine that you see in the gym. So if you look at those big weight stacks, cable units with the pulleys, imagine that, but really small, fits in your hands. It weighs less than 10 pounds physically, but it provides a lot more resistance, and you can adjust it. You can mount it to squat racks, poles, trees, fences, but you can also have wall mounts and sliding tracks. So we're kind of found between facilities like personal training studio or even a college weight room or high school, or obviously talking about the professional teams, all the way to physical therapy clinics and military units, and then home gyms as well. Just because our big value of the product with those cable machines and with those pro teams was that it was space saving, it was small, portable, so it gave a lot of freedom and flexibility so that you can put the product anywhere. But if you also are in a group or team setting, you can have a lot of these in a small space so that you're not waiting or, relying on sharing a limited number of equipment for quite a few, athletes or clients in the space. So our big value props were space saving. And then it was also the affordability compared to regular cable machines was certainly something that most cable machines were thousands of dollars. Ours, we kept it under $1,000. And
It's
then the last
ridiculous
kind
how
of
much
being,
money those giant ones
yeah,
cost.
that's, for us, it was ready out of the box. You know what I mean? It was really, we were trying to make cable training more accessible. And it's amazing how much that resonated with the top, sports performance athletes. And they really liked it too, because our cable, different than a weight stack, traditional cable machine, is that you can move it at speed. So a lot of the athlete performance world took to it because they could do like really fast rotational movements for rotational power, which is so crucial in so many sports. So that was kind of a unique aspect too, why the brand kind of got really, really catapulted in that direction. But as I mentioned, like it's such a wide variety of where you see the product today, because it's just more accessible cables, and so many different types of training and types of people can all benefit from cable training. So that was what we focused on, was the accessibility of cables.
If you could look back in time in your whole journey, what would you attribute your success to?
It's tough to put on one thing. I think there's a lot of things. I can be
Give me
look
the
back
first
and,
thing that
and
comes
be
to mind.
be very grateful. I have to definitely attribute, to my family, the opportunity to, even I can go back as, my upbringing as, childhood, in terms of pursuing sports and showing that, fitness, like that stuff's important, to education, and, pushing me to, obviously, for me, college is very important because I had that injury, and, I had that idea, and I met Nathaniel, was able to go to grad school. So that fact that, health is important, education was important. Those things that they just, gave me the opportunity to come to the US. And obviously that's where I think there's just, so much opportunity here. So, I'm blessed for that. So I think at the rudimentary level, it's like, if it wasn't for my family, and having those opportunities as a kid to kind of shape where I'm going today, certainly wouldn't have been able to get even up to the batter's box to even try to take a swing. So that's where, my huge gratitude first and foremost is. But they taught me to, you work hard and you've got to, be honest, and you got to treat people well. So, it's
Your
so many of
values,
those
yeah.
like fundamental principles that you look back on. It's like, oh, it makes sense. You know what I mean? You don't leave a mess out, and you don't, run across, the neighbor's yard with something to mess up their yard because it's their property and you need to respect that. And
Streaking.
okay, treat people. Luckily, I tried to stay away from that, but it's all those things, and it comes back to like, okay, well, I have a lot to be grateful for, that fact that I was just even had the opportunity to try to do this. So, very, very fortunate. But that's, I would say, the first thing that comes to mind is certainly my family, my parents and siblings. So
If you could go back to 18, 19, 20-year-old Isaac, what would you tell him?
probably tell them a few things. One would be definitely, take a step back to, not be so worried about and I think caught up in, what everyone else is doing, or everyone else thinks about what you're going to do, or, worried about, are you going to, find what you really want to do? Because the reality is that for, most people in that age group, it's like, hey, you're going to be working for like 40 plus years. And if it takes you a few of those years to find something that you really like to do, and okay, it took you 5 years to do that, but you're going to be working for, like, that's pretty good in the grand scheme. If you're going to work 40 plus years and it took you 5 years and you like really found out what you really wanted to do. So I think, that kind of aspect of, instead of being worried about, okay, try things, go for it. That I think mentality would have definitely, I think, changed and possibly, made me, even more proactive to do things and try things and get out there. Cause certainly, I kind of had that advice laid on me later on. And I realized like, hey, that certainly could have helped, and, reduce the pressure you put on yourself and I think the people around you. Cause, when you do want to strive for something, you also, you want to make, your family proud, and you want to show that, hey, you work hard and you can do well. And, that would be the big thing I would say, that. And then, just worried about relationships too, because never underestimate anyone was probably another thing that I wish I even had reemphasized, because you just never know who anyone is. You never know where they come from, their background. That, the reality is like, they can be helpful to you. You know what I mean? Create a good relationship. Don't come in and, not say hello, not be friendly, regardless of who they are, what they look like, where they're from, like any of those things. Like those are probably two of the things that I would go back and say, like, make sure you don't ever underestimate anyone. And, even if you think they don't know anything about what I'm doing, they're not going to be helpful. Like, that's just the type of, young, naive response that you want to grow out of and mature out of. And, change your perspective.
Thank you for coming in. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Catch you on another early day.